Mr. Chairman, we're live.
Corporations Committee, and if you could go ahead and take roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Brown,
Present.
Representative Locke,
Present.
Representative Heft. Here. Representative Johnson,
Here.
Representative Lucas,
Present.
Representative Webb,
Here.
Representative Weber,
Here.
Representative Yin,
Here.
Chairman Knapp.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
All right. Welcome, everybody. This is your Corporations Committee. Just a couple rules to go through since we do have visitors to testify. Everything goes through the chair, so when you address the committee, it'll be through the chair, and the committee will address the chair through you. So I know it seems odd, but that's the formality of it. But first up today, we will have House Bill 249, runoff elections, and we have Speaker Nyman.
Good afternoon, committee. Good afternoon, Chairman. We're honored to be able to be before you this afternoon and discuss runoff elections. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, I would like to kind of just give you a little bit of an overview of some of the reasoning behind why I believe that this is an extremely important piece of legislation for the state of Wyoming. As you all may know, Wyoming is a supermajority Republican state. And the issue that I see with this is that so many times our primaries are basically when the elections in Wyoming take place. While I'm sure the good minority leader would love to be able to see a more balanced number of people and more debate on that, the reality of it is where Wyoming is at currently is that our elections are primarily finished and considered in the primaries. Well, depending on how many people are running in those primaries, Wyoming doesn't allow for or doesn't take into account a majority of those that would win that primary. We elect based on plurality, which means if there's 8 people in that race, 5 people in that race, whoever gets the most votes of that race moves on to the general election. And so far in Wyoming, and just based on the makeup of our state and how our have extremely heavily, as I said, supermajority of Republicans, that means that if you get elected basically in the primary, you're probably going to win the general. The concern that I have as a voter and as a taxpayer and anybody that would love to be able to have a reflective view of those that elect us and those that we represent is I believe that we need to be able to be putting people into these positions that have at least a majority plus 1 vote. And what we've now started to see develop, and we've seen in past elections, is that many times people leaving the primary will have far less than a majority of the vote of those that have been elected or run in that race. For example, it is no secret that our chief executive left the primary in his first election into governor with 34% of the vote, which to me says that 66% of the people also would like to have had another opportunity or selection. So there's other races that we can go to. One elected race from a governor previous to that was 28% of the vote. Move them forward out of the primary to the general with no real opportunity to be able to have other input from other runners and make sure that we have somebody that's leaving that represents our party with at least 50% plus 1 of the vote. Therefore, I bring you runoff elections. This is not new. I've done this since I was actually first in the legislature 4 years ago. And I believe that because of the fact that we elect on a plurality and because of the fact that we are a supermajority Republican state, it is incumbent upon us and behooves us to actually have an election where somebody has to move ahead and have a head-to-head if we don't have a person that garners that at least 50% plus 1. And so that's what I would bring you today. The runoff election would take place, and basically going through the bill, as you look at it, most of the meat of this bill is adding some words to our current election verbiage in our statutes. But as you go on down through, there's going to be some work in here, and I can take you through the bill. Flipping over to page 2, one of the key points I want to make, if more than 2 candidates in a partisan election for the offices specified in the subsection. This is beginning to read at line 17 down through 23. In this subsection, for a tie the highest number of votes in the primary election, the state canvassing board shall cast lots to determine which two shall run off election candidates before. Question would be, has this ever happened? No, but it could. And so what we've tried to do is go through all of this piece of legislation and to try to take care of any issues that could possibly or potentially come up. That is currently what would happen. If two or more candidates in a partisan primary election for the offices specified in this subsection tie for the second highest, and so on. So that's what you're looking down through the meat of the bill. And page number 3, highlighted here on mine, is set line 17. If required under section, runoff election shall be held on the first Tuesday after the second Monday in August in general election years. And I trust there's going to be some testimony coming by the Clerks Association and potentially our Secretary of State to kind of lay out some of this and how that would fit and how that would look. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to change when our primaries begin. This is going to move us closer to that May timeline. There's going to have to be, and they can kind of elaborate on that a little bit more and what's going to have to be changed, I hope. But what it's going to allow for is that, and another thing I need to make sure that you know about, this only affects our top 5 electeds and our nationals. This does not affect us as representatives or senators. So our election could take place at the primary, but ideally, and that's, we're going to go back into the back of this bill, because we have the opportunity to do some determinations on how that's going to work and potentially put this together with the help of the clerks to do our runoffs in August, as we normally do, and then our top 5s would run in an earlier election in May. And then if they do not garner that 50% plus 1 of the vote, then they would run with the rest of us in August and then go on to the general. And so, and that would also allow for the opportunity to have any other elections that are taking place, boards or whatever, would all take place in that August election. And so, and that was some of the hiccups that we ran into before, and I tried to make adjustments for that. Many of the legislators said, well, hey, I don't even know if I'm going to run. You're pushing this up on me so hard and stuff like that. And I'm trying to decide if I'm even going to do this. Well, the top 5s and the national and the statewide electeds, as far as our national electeds, they're running by that time. They're already up and they're going. In fact, right now for governor, we've got a couple candidates that are already named and they're moving ahead in the next election coming in 26. So for us as representatives, maybe by the time you get done with a really arduous, long deal and you're on the second end and you just finished a budget session, you may be questioning your sanity and want to know if you really want to do this ever again. You might want enough time to kind of let your heels cool and decide if this is something you want to take on again. That would allow for that. And so, but the key thing I'm wanting to do here is to make sure that if our people that are going to be representing statewide, our top 5 electeds and our national electeds, in my mind, when they leave that primary, they need to leave with at least 50% plus 1 of the votes in order to represent, I believe, the state in a way that really we should be represented. Going on down through, talking about creating some accounts. We're going to have money in this with the idea that we're going to have to put some money in this. And I know this is a year when we just got done talking, and we're going to go back upstairs later and talk some more about the need to be conservative and not spend money that's unnecessary. But in this is created an account with the Secretary of State's office to be able to reimburse counties that would have to have a runoff election, so that this is not an onerous thing that they're going to have to fund, an unfunded mandate. This money will be in that account and held in that account, that if there are runoff elections, which there may or may not be, that's the other part of this that is a little fluid. What happens if you don't need one? Well, then that expense will not be there. But if you do need one, the counties will be reimbursed. Let's see, going on down through. Most of this is all ballot information. As you look at, I mean, basically we went through our election laws and our election codes and inserted the word runoff. More ballot formation as you go to turn page 6. Keeping on going. Just added language on page 7, section 2, keeping on. I mean, it's really, we boil all the way down to the back is we're amending our current legislation to be able to allow for that extra opportunity to vote. Held at normal polling locations. I already mentioned it bears only to the top 5s and to our national electeds. Clerks will post that information. There will be a few more requirements of notification, but that would be something that we would take care of on the clerks and be able to make sure that they're whole on that. You can read on down through the bill. It's a substantial bill. There's a lot there, but ladies and gentlemen, I would say to you that most of this is just filling in language to fit our current laws. On page 13, beginning at line 7, it says, "This subsection shall not prevent a person from registering to vote under subsection A of the section for the runoff election if the person was not registered to vote at the time of the applicable primary election and did not register at the polls at the primary election." This was an effort to make sure that if you did not actually vote in that primary, that you can still vote in the runoff. So we're not disenfranchising anybody or saying, hey, because you didn't vote in that first one, if you're a registered elector in the state of Wyoming, you may vote in that runoff, even though you did not vote in the primary for those. And so we want to make sure that people have as much access as we possibly can, and to be able to offer their vote to see who they want to lead the state or in those capacities. Unless you guys have some other questions, we can certainly go over it. Filing period. If you go to page 15, an application for the nomination shall be filed not more than, and we did change some of this times here, from 96 went to 90 days, not later than from 81 to 80 days, next preceding the primary election. So trying to give as much time as we possibly can, and we'll chat a little bit more about that hopefully with the clerks as they get up here and talk about the ability to be able to provide these dates and to make sure that it all fits, and that people can be notified and get the votes back and everything we've been talking about here in the last 2 to 3 days in all of our election work. Major party precinct committeemen and committeewomen elected the primary election shall be deemed elected without further action, so they do not have to run in the general, so we can take care of that there. Moving on through the bill, election districts, it talks a little bit more about the timing, and that is all because of the fact that we're moving this ahead in order to fulfill those obligations and to provide an appropriate amount of time between each of the elections. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you what, that's just about it. Write-ins are allowed in the runoff, so if you have a write-in election that you want to do, that also would be allowed. And so we can talk more about that and visit with that with the clerks if they so see fit. Moving on down through the bill, it is just basically filling in those times and those verbiage in order to make it comply with our current legislation. I don't know what else to tell you, ladies and gentlemen. All I know is this. It concerns me that we're electing people that do not have over half the vote. And I think Wyoming is in a very specific position because of, as I said earlier, because this is a major party state and the plurality that we currently use, I believe that people need to have the opportunity. Now, there is some discussion out there, and maybe we can go into this, and maybe it's a question you'll ask, maybe it's not. There's been some discussion out there about the potential of waning voter turnout in that runoff. I would have to push back on that and say, you know what, I would have to say no, because I believe that if you've got two candidates, and we can even look back at one of these last elections and see how closely that was, you're going to have two candidates, then they're going to have to fight for the vote of the rest of those people that did not vote for them on that last go around. So, for example, you've got a candidate that won with 28%, you got another one that won with 27%, you got another one, and then all the balance of them. Those two forward on, they're going to have to make a concerted and conscious effort to garner the votes of all the rest of those folks to be able to bring them to where they're thinking and where they would want to find support for them. They're going to have to campaign harder when they go into that runoff. They're going to have to try to win those folks that they did not get voted for before. And you look at the rest of that, even in the Freese-Hageman, I think we can say that, the Gordon Freese-Hageman vote, I would have to assume that because of that, we would have had a runoff between Governor Gordon and Foster Freese. Well, would have all of the candidates, all the voters that voted for Harriet Hageman and the others the rest of the way down the ballot, they would have had to have been courted and tried to be brought on to make sure that they could feel like they had representation. So to me, when you get a head-to-head like that, the decision's going to be made in that runoff. I personally believe, and I would be much more interested in that vote and finding out why I need to vote for one of those two, because you were maybe one or maybe neither of you were my first vote. So I need to know why I need to vote for you. And so with that, I would be glad to stand for any questions and hopefully be able to answer those for you here this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Speaker Nyman. Questions from the committee for Speaker? Minority Leader Ian.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Speaker Nyman, it's twice in one day. I'm blessed. So
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative Young.
you and I have discussed this. I mean, I think previously, my preference has always been to treat the general election as a runoff and do it how we do nonpartisan elections, where we have up to 4 in the primary and then we end up with 2 in the general election. But I guess my biggest concern is that this affects both major parties, right? It affects your party, it affects my party. I'm curious on whether you would be interested in letting a party decide if they wanted to do runoffs. So if the party's central committee issued a resolution saying, yes, we want to do runoffs, and another party said, no, we don't want to do runoffs, would that be something you'd be amenable to?
Speaker?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, I don't even know what that'd look like. I would have to have that, I would have to, say Clerks Association, if maybe they could opine on that and how that would even structure. I mean, I'm already making this a little bit more complicated with a couple more steps. But I think if you had some people say, well, we're just going to choose not to participate or we're going to go a different direction, I think it would make it pretty complicated. But if it doesn't, that's something I would think that these folks that have far more knowledge and the ability to handle that would be able to answer that clearly for you, Representative Yin. I know this creates an extra step, but again, ladies and gentlemen, I think the critical part of this is money well spent because we're actually getting somebody into these positions that we know that over half of the people of the state of Wyoming want to serve in that position. And so my concern is, and we are already seeing it shape up. I mean, I've already heard where there could be potentially 8 candidates in this upcoming governor's race, and that field consistently seems to grow. And so, well, let's say you have 7 or 8 people that are all well-funded and can hang in there and fight it all the way out to the end. I mean, you could potentially end up with a primary winner that's with 20% or less the vote. And so I don't want that, and I don't think that the people of the state of Wyoming would want that, and I think they would like to have the opportunity to narrow that field down and make sure that we're more comfortable with the person that's going to be in that position to hold the handles of power. So I'm sure that you'll get your answer to your question here in a little bit. I have every bit of faith in my clerks and my Secretary of State.
Follow up? Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Appreciate your time, committee.
Next, we will have the agencies. Mr. Secretary, you have the option. Do you want to go now or would you like to go after? Okay. Secretary Gray, welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chuck Gray, the Wyoming Secretary of State. On runoff elections, House Bill 249, first want to say that I stand in favor of this bill. As written, this bill would require a runoff election to be held if a candidate for statewide or federal office in a primary election does not receive 50% of the vote. Runoff elections ensure the winner has true majority support and therefore broader legitimacy. They promote a clearer voter mandate and can lead to more stable governance. Where this has effectuated itself out most prominently is in gubernatorial races. And everybody talks about 2018, where it was 33% from the winner. But a lot of times 2010 gets forgotten too, where it was 28.7% with the second place candidate at 28%. I mean, that was a 0.7% win, barely over a quarter of the vote within a primary. And so it's important to note that this has affected, and because re-elections are, have been won by both of those candidates, this has affected the last, 16 years of the leader of the executive branch within the state of Wyoming. So as for implementation, we can implement this bill as written. The bill does move the date of the primary from August to the first Tuesday after the first Monday in May. The runoff election would be held on the first Tuesday after the second Monday in August. That is something to think about. I mean, you're talking about on these races, candidate filing in February. That's why I think that the approach that the speaker went with on starting with the statewides is, I think, a good approach to take in terms of starting with that, starting with the statewides, federal and state electeds. And then I think that certainly for legislative and other races, once we get that pilot going, if you will, although I'm not sure that's the best word, then we evaluate it for that as well. Because I think that the principle of it is a good one. The bill moves various other dates associated with the election, such as the date upon which we certify to the clerks of the offices to appear on the ballot. That's on page 9. And the date that the state canvassing board meets, that's on page 24. The bill would also require us to provide an additional notice to the county clerks in the event of a runoff, page 25. And it would require candidates in a runoff to file an additional campaign finance disclosure, page 35. Now, in terms of implementing this, within making changes to our voter registration system, YOReg, and the campaign finance filing system, YOReg upgrades would cost $247,000 and change, and YCFIS upgrades would cost $35,218. But this can be done, and in our reading could be paid for out of the runoff election account created on page 4 of the bill. So I stand in support of House Bill 249 and appreciate the opportunity to testify.
Thanks, Secretary Gray. Are there any questions from the committee? None? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right, next we will have any members of the public that are here to testify on this particular bill. If you can come up and take a seat, and we'll just handle you one by one and hear from you.
Good morning, Chairman, and the very familiar committee. I'm Gail Simmons from Sheridan with Civics 307 and YVote, and I'm on and against the bill. I get it, I really do. The state majority party apparatus doesn't like Governor Mark Gordon and are still upset with the results of the 2018 primary election. How unfortunate for them that he continues to enjoy one of the highest approval ratings in the country. It certainly does not justify an upheaval in our election processes. Officially, the election that determines the winner is in November. He handily won the majority then, and in 2022, won by 58 points in the primary, receiving 61.5% of the votes. This bill requires a majority rather than a plurality. This is the exact opposite, Mr. Chairman, of the testimony for the prohibition of ranked choice voting, which forces a majority. Then it was, we don't need a majority, a plurality is fine. Now it's reversed. Note that while I do not believe that RCV is appropriate for Wyoming, it certainly would achieve the stated objective of this bill. To accommodate runoff elections, actually, I'm not even gonna go through it. I have a handout for you where I took the current dates as they will stand and continue to stand for all of the other elections, and put where the various parts of that process is, and then what the proposal is for the primary being pulled in to accommodate a runoff in August. And as you note, the proclamation then becomes 3 February to 13 February. An application for nomination is 4 February to 14 February. While, regardless of whether it's the short or long session, the legislature is still in session. The runoffs only apply to the federal offices, Congress and senators, and the top 5 state elected. I also note that this does not include the presidential primary. The most positive thing I would see in this occurring would be an opportunity for all Republicans, registered Republicans, to actually participate in nominating during the presidential cycle, the Republican basically the Republican candidate for president, which we currently cannot do, and it is accomplished in a convention. So it's unfortunate that literally that's the most positive thing I see in here. This change in particular impacts those high school students who reach the age of majority between May and mid-August, who no longer have an opportunity to participate in those elections. Wyoming Republican primary elections have historical participation rates from 60 to 70%, with the Democratic being even lower. The general elections are typically from 90 to 95%, which is in keeping with the fact that that's actually the official election. A study of congressional primary runoffs from 1994 to 2022 found that in 96% of the cases, turnout decreased from primary to runoff with a median decrease of 40%. That would translate to a 25 to 30% participation in a Wyoming runoff. Because the way that this is set up, that likely would be what happens in the early primary for just those top electeds rather than August when everybody else is running. So this results in 3 elections each cycle because we will still have August whether there's a runoff or not. And it's solely to provide greater control of outcomes by the majority party. I understand that each election is about $1.3 million, so that's a 150% increase in the cost of elections every 2 years. If the issue is truly about reflecting the will of the majority, that can be accomplished at no additional cost to changing our closed primary elections to top 2 open primaries. The party could nominate via caucus, which gives complete control over the participants to the party. This also eliminates all those pesky concerns about changes in party affiliation. In almost all races at each level of government, the result would be competition between 2 Republicans in the November general election. This provides the competitive head-to-head the Speaker of the House mentioned. It also is then the official general election. And with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions from committee? Minority Leader Yin.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Simmons, thanks. So your timeline has us applying to be nominated for reelection in session. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, only for the top 5 state electeds and whichever one or two of the 3 congressional.
So if Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
so if one of us wanted to run for a top 5, a statewide seat, if one of us wanted to run for a statewide seat, we would be in session and could possibly be campaigning in session while we're doing that?
Ms. Simmons?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yin, yes. And that is also true for any of the top 5 electeds, including the governor, who I don't know about you, but I would prefer to him to be paying attention primarily to what's going on in the legislature rather than running for election.
Anything else? No? Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Simmons.
Thank you.
All right, if you can identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Stanley Jasinski from Weston County. I just wanted to say that I'm in support of this bill, so I won't recap anything that Representative Diamond or Secretary of State Gray said. But I would like to say that, in this last election of '24, it was such an important election. The whole world and country was watching. And by time Wyoming had their primary in August, basically most of the states had already weighed in. And it was sort of like we were left out of the game. I was saying, if we could have our primary earlier, like in May, then Wyoming could be part of the conversation or part of the support and be recognized instead of as a leader in our primaries for the country, instead of basically just coming up in the rear, And so I just thought that having the primary earlier in the year would give Wyoming a louder voice with the country and support. And I certainly wanted, because I know what Wyoming was going to do in '24. And I wanted us to be weighed in way before basically the election was almost over by that time. So I just think for that purposes, an early primary would give Wyoming a louder voice in our country. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions?
I'll stand for questions. Yeah.
Minority Leader Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just wanted to let you know that this doesn't affect the presidential primary at all. I wish it did, right? I agree with you. I think we need a bigger voice, and the way the dates are set prevents us from having that. But unfortunately, this doesn't affect the presidential primary date.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I misunderstood that. I thought it was the top 5 federal positions. So I'm sorry if I misunderstood that. Thank you.
I think it's the top 5 and then our congressional and Senate seat for national, but not the presidency.
Oh.
That's all right. Thank you.
It'll be good. Thanks.
Any other questions? All right. Anybody else in the public wishing to testify on this topic? We'll take organizations next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, sitting in support of this bill. This lines up quite well with my members' policy, of which I'm down here to represent. I think this is, of all the options out there, if you have several people running for office, I think this is the best option, a runoff election, to come up with who the people really want. Something that I have to reiterate that the good speaker said, under our current system, you can end up somebody going into office that a strong majority of the people don't want. So I think having this runoff election between the top 2, I realize it's going to cost a little bit of money, but I think it's important that, the top 2, so a majority of the people voting in that election, that's who gets elected. I think that's the best way for Wyoming to go forward. And I think it could quite possibly encourage more people to run. We won't know until we try it, but I don't think it'll discourage people from running. And having more horses in the race probably would not be a bad thing. And another point is, it's only if somebody doesn't get a majority. So if somebody in the primary, for these 5 or 7, 8 positions, my math isn't real good today, but for these 8 positions, if somebody does get a majority, it's done. But if they don't, if somebody gets 26%, another person gets 24%, those 2 go head to head in a runoff election. So I think then that would have a better chance of having a better representation of what the people of Wyoming want. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would take any questions you or the committee may have for me.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you for your
Thank you, sir.
testimony. All right, next, if we could have the clerks. Welcome. Okay, if you guys want to go ahead and state your names for the record.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Mary Langford, and I have the honor of representing the Wyoming County Clerks. Joining me today at the table is the Honorable Malcolm Irvin, who is the Platte County Clerk as well as the President of the County Clerks Association. And our purpose today is to focus on administration of Wyoming elections and the runoff election proposal. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Clerk Irvin.
All right, thank you, Clerk.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Malcolm Irvin, Platte County Clerk. Realistically, we don't have a lot to say on this one. Our role, as Mary said, is specifically to talk about the administrative aspects, and that policy decision is yours. But one reason we have so little to talk about with this is we've worked very closely with Speaker Nyman over the last 4 years on this bill. very appreciative of the speaker's time and efforts from his very first year in the legislature to work with us and had a genuine care whether this could work. And Mr. Chairman, we appreciate that, and saying that it can work. One of the things that we will be monitoring very closely as the session goes is there's so many election-related bills. I think you've noticed that. There's so many election-related bills that could impact timelines and administration. We may have to seek some sort of little changes in here at some point in this bill, just to make sure we're conforming with some of those timeline changes or administrative aspects. So we're really going to be paying attention to other pieces that could impact this down the line. Mr. Chairman, the one timeline concern we have had in the past was in redistricting years. And you'll notice Section 3, I believe it is, on page 40, allows for some leeway for the Joint Corporations Committee alongside the Secretary of State, the county clerks, to work through any timeline issues that we may have in a redistricting year. Won't impact us in 26, won't impact us in 28, but we need to have that discussion prior to 2030 and 2032, just to make sure that we can reapportion and deliver on our very first timeline, which is on page 19. County clerk's very first statutory deadline in an election year would be the third Tuesday in January. When I say statutory deadline, that doesn't mean that's when we've started working on it. That means when our first work is due. Currently, it's the first meeting in May, first county commissioner meeting in May. Realistically, we've started that work in January, February to make sure it's ready for May. So this accelerates our timeline, but Mr. Chairman, as written, it's workable. From an administrative aspect, it's your policy decision to make. I want to be clear on that. And so as this session goes, we will just be very open and honest with the speaker. And we know he will be receptive to that. He's been receptive to all of our comments on this bill, just to make sure any adjustments that need to be made can be made. Ultimately, if this is implemented, we want it to be successful, because at the end of the day, it's us that takes it, the public barrage, if it doesn't work. And so we really have a vested interest in making sure, if this is the policy decision, that it works.
Thank you. Mary, did you have any comments either?
No, I don't.
Okay.
With that, we're happy to stand for any questions.
All right, are there any questions? Minority Leader Yin.
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So the same question I had for Speaker Nyman. I think it's possible to have a party opt out and still not do it, because on page 3, we can add another subsection Romanet I. So we have situations where, if there's a majority vote, we don't have to have a runoff. So do you think it would be possible if we had a party, we could have a situation where a party opts out of runoffs? And is there a good date where you would need to know that by if we did do that?
Mr. Chairman.
Clerk Irwin.
Excellent question, Representative Yin. And for us, same thing. We think that's a policy decision on your part. If that is the will, what we would ask for is that it would be in the county convention in the odd numbered year, so that we roughly have about 6 months notice that this would come. So sometime middle of the non-election year, so odd numbered years. And Mr. Chairman, I think it's important to remember, it may not always be just 2 majority parties. In 2018, there were 4 majority parties. And so there's always a possibility that there are others out there. And so if that's the will of the legislature, that those parties could opt out of that runoff process, that's fine by us. We just want to make sure we have enough time to plan and prepare. One of those first deadlines is notifying each of the parties how many election judges we need. We begin that planning early. And part of that planning will center around how many potential runoffs we could have. So, Mr. Chairman, we would just ask that it's in the odd numbered year.
Follow up? Any other questions? I had just one. Did you have any bets whether he would become speaker first or get this bill done first?
It's, Mr. Chairman, it's this big so far from when we first started.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. All right. Are there any other agencies or organizations? And we had nobody online, correct, Matt?
Mr. Chairman, we have two individuals online.
Oh, we
who would
do.
like to
Okay.
testify. Yes.
Who is the first one?
Jenny DeSaro, I'll admit her now.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Committee. I am Jenny DeSaro with the Equality State Policy Center. I'm zooming in from Cody. The Equality State Policy Center is a nonpartisan organization started by a coalition of Wyomingites in service of Wyomingites, committed to ensuring fair elections and transparent government in Wyoming for over 30 years. We appreciate the intent of this bill. However, we suggest an alternative option where we continue to maintain our current candidate filing date, our current primary election date, with the top two vote getters facing off in the general election. Let's keep it simple. With 1 in 4 voters showing up in the 2024 primary election, we have strong reservations about getting voters to show up on 2 different dates, May and August, if they'd like to participate in this election of the 5 elected and U.S. congressional candidates. Wyoming general elections typically have a higher voter turnout and ultimately decides the winning candidates, not the primaries. We would like to see a budget line articulated to increase voter outreach and education if this bill were to move forward. In conclusion, we encourage the committee to reconsider options that are less cumbersome rather than move this forward today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you for testifying today. I think the next one we have is Julie Freeze, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. I'll admit her now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of
Clerk
the.
Freeze, welcome. Sorry to keep you hanging for several meetings, by the way,
No, that's okay.
online there, but glad to see.
I understand totally. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I just was here in case we needed to have any other testimonies. So it seems like our clerk and our consultant did an awesome job. So I don't have anything to add, but thank you very much for allowing me to speak today.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Freeze? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
Okay, no more online
Mr. Chairman, no.
and no more in the room. So with that, I'll close the audience participation for public testimony. And committee, what is your pleasure? Okay, we have moved by Representative Weber, seconded by Representative Johnson. Are there amendments? We'll just go through, I'm just going to go through maybe page by page until that no longer works. Anything from pages 1 through 5? Okay. Any amendments from 6 through 10? Any amendments from pages 11 through 15? We're halfway there. Any amendments from page 16 through 20? Any amendments from page 21 through 25? From pages 26 through 30? Pages 31 through 35? And pages 36 through 42.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative,
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So at the end of page 41, I'd like to add us on section 5 and then renumber the following section. that would appropriate $200,000 for the Secretary of State to educate voters on the changes that are in this bill.
Is there a second? Seeing no second, that motion dies. Are there any other amendments? Okay, seeing none, we are voting on House Bill 249. Will you please poll the committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a roll call vote on House Bill 249, runoff elections. Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Locke.
Aye.
Representative Heft.
Aye.
Representative Johnson.
Aye.
Representative Lucas.
Aye.
Representative Webb.
Aye.
Representative Weber.
Aye.
Representative Yin.
No.
Chairman Knapp.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 8 ayes, 1 no.
With that, House Bill 249 does pass the committee. All right. I've declared this Mr. Speaker Day, so the next up is House Bill 269. Oh, 296, I apologize. Mr. Speaker, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your consideration on that previous bill. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you House Bill 296, constitutional apportionment, and would ask for your favorable consideration. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a bill that's been a long time in coming, and it is an extremely important bill to some very important people to me, and that is my constituents in Weston County as part of my District 1. Quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, what you're going to look at here is a concern that has been held by folks that we are not within the scope of our Constitution as a state and how we apportion our representatives and how we set up based on Article 3, Section 36 of our Constitution. And so this is an effort to try to go back and to reevaluate that and what we have done and the moves that we have made as a state to assimilate with legislation that has been passed down from the federal government in basically saying that our Constitution is not fulfilling what its responsibility is, but they're saying we need to really look at our Constitution and say we have some very clear verbiage in our Constitution about how we are supposed to apportion our senatorial and representative districts, and that we want the opportunity as the people of the state of Wyoming, and specifically District 1, to be able to go back in there and reevaluate that and see if we can more align with what our state constitution asks us to do, while not allowing anybody to not be represented, have full weight of their vote cast and be able to be recognized, but to get ourselves back into alignment with what our Constitution was ratified and was accepted as we became a state in the initial, of course, Articles of Incorporation. And so if you look at this, what we're going to say here in this particular piece of legislation is an outline of what our state constitution says and what we were said that we were going to do based on one senator per county is what it was broke down as, and then a breakdown in regard to population in regards to our representative representation. And so that is what we're attempting to do here. And if you move all the way through the back of this to the back of the bill, you'll see that Section 3 really lays it out, and this is where we want to, this is where we need you folks to give strong consideration to this and to recognize that this needs to be addressed, and we want to make sure that we're doing this right. Section 3 says that basically the Management Council of the Wyoming Legislature shall assign a committee to the legislature to study apportionment of the legislature as provided by the act during the 2025 interim, and assigned committee shall conduct meetings in communities around Wyoming to take input on apportionment options from members of the public and other interested stakeholders. The committee shall report its findings to the legislature. So this is not just a flash in the pan, ladies and gentlemen. We're asking to be able to go back through and thoughtfully consider and look at our state constitution and how we have to and what we have to do to bring ourselves back into alignment so that we reflect and are responsible to our state constitution while making sure that every citizen of the state of Wyoming is equally and properly represented in the vote, not later than December 1st, 2025. The Committee of Management may introduce legislation, which we can bring a bill after this study and after this work and after this information is gathered, to constitutionally apportion the legislature for introduction in the 2026 budget session of the Wyoming legislature. If we go back into the bill, you can see as it's broken down, the different statements that are made in our state constitution. As you look in it and can, basically, we're wanting to conform to what it said and be able to meet with the 14th Amendment and to be able to meet our responsibility and obligation to the people of the state of Wyoming that is so clearly written in our Constitution. Legislatures are creatures of the Constitution. They owe their existence to the Constitution. They derive their powers from the Constitution. It is their commission, and therefore all their acts must be conformable, to it, or else they will be voided. And that was a determination made in the Moore v. Harper determination. Article 20, Section 1 of the Wyoming Constitution provides that the Wyoming Constitution may be amended and specifies in what manner. The apportionment provisions of the Wyoming Constitution are quite clear, explicit, and mandatory, and leave no room for confusion or doubt as to what the legislature is to do about reapportionment when it is to do it. And that is also found in the Whitehead versus Gage decision. Article 3, Section 3, which we discussed earlier, of the Wyoming Constitution provides in relevant part, each county shall constitute a senatorial and representative district. The Senate and the House of Representatives shall be composed of members elected by the legal voters of the counties respectively every 2 years. They shall be apportioned among the said counties as nearly as may be according to the number of the inhabitants. Each county shall have at least one senator and one representative, but at no time shall the number of members of the House and Representatives be less than twice nor greater than 3 times the number of members of the Senate. That is out of our Constitution. And so that's what we're trying to go back and to abide by and to try to figure out how we can make that work to provide equal representation senatorially and in representatives based on a population. Article 3, Section 48 of the Wyoming Constitution provides that at the first budget session of the legislature following the federal census, the legislature shall reapportion its membership based upon that census. We just actually discussed that briefly in the last bill that you guys talked about. Notwithstanding any other provision of the article, any bill to apportion the legislature may be introduced in the budget session at the same manner as the general session, and that is also found in Article 3, Section 48 of our Wyoming Constitution. Since 1992, ladies and gentlemen, the Wyoming legislature, contrary to Wyoming's constitutional apportionment provisions, has allowed for the creation of legislative districts that do not follow county lines and legislative districts that do not have at least one representative and one senator per county. And the good representative next to me will probably be able to speak more clearly that to one of our least populated counties and the impact that it's had on them. Apportionment for the Wyoming legislature must also conform with the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, under which the overriding objective is that the vote of the citizen is approximately equal in weight to that of any other citizen in the state. Conformation to both federal and state constitutions may be best achieved with the legislature of manageable size. No inconsistency exists between the requirements of the Wyoming Constitution, Article 3, Section 3 and 48, and those of the Equal Protections Clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, and the Wyoming legislature must fully comply with both constitutions in apportionment of legislative elections. Legislature would further find in this legislation, the legislature shall make a good faith effort to apportion itself as required by the 14th Amendment in conformance with the principle that the vote of any citizen is approximately equal in weight to that of any other citizen in this state. The legislature shall make a good faith effort to apportion itself as required by Article 3, Section 3 and 48 of the Wyoming Constitution by providing for legislative districts that follow county lines and legislative districts that have at least one representative and one senator per county. And we've read on the back of it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an effort by a group of people that want us to follow our Constitution, is quite frankly what this boils down to. And if we're not going to follow it the way that it's been written, then we need to amend it as a state so that we can follow it. They simply want us to be able to follow our Constitution as it's written. And I appreciate that. We often hear on the floor the requirement and the necessity for us to respect this Constitution that we swore to uphold when all of us, and it was even referenced the other day, We raised our hand and we swore to uphold our Constitution. But I didn't swear to uphold a Constitution that said, but in case that, well, maybe in that, but maybe not in this, I mean, we're here to adopt and to believe in and to support that Constitution. And this is an effort to find a way that we can do that with our Wyoming Constitution and respect it, and the people that drafted it, and the people that want desperately for us to follow it, and to be able to do it in a way that does not remove anyone's ability to have their voice heard, and for their voice and their vote to count equally with everyone else in this state. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do we have any questions? Minority Leader Yin.
I would never believe it.
Mr. Chairman, Speaker Nyman, I feel for Weston County, and I think it's great that both of the representatives are here that represent those parts of both sections of Weston County. I think it's unfortunate that we don't have a lot of historical knowledge on the committee from when redistricting took place. I think I'm probably the only one here that was on, maybe in the chamber, probably in the entire chamber that was on corporations when we did redistricting. And Senator Driscoll fought really hard for Weston County to have that representative. I think my biggest question is do you envision a way that we could fulfill both? So I'm trying to think I can think of only two ways that we could fulfill both. We either merge counties, which I don't think anyone wants to do, or we make a lot more representatives and senators, which would be really hard for us. So curious on if you have any ideas of what we can do to fulfill both obligations.
Mr.
Chairman?
Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Yin, it's a good question, and we've talked about that. We've all, nobody here wants to grow government, and that's what it would be. It would just be an expansion of it, which it is. I mean, you would take your smallest county, you would divide that, and you divide it equally in your House of Representatives, and then you would, reflect the county on the senatorial side of it, and that would be the way it would be broke down. But there are, and I do, it's my fault, and maybe one of the folks behind me here can give that information. There are ways that we can look at this, that we can broke down a weight of the vote so that we don't have to necessarily expand the size of the legislature and yet equally and fairly reflect the vote and the weight of each one of those citizens based on larger population areas versus smaller population areas. So there are suggestions out there. There are folks out here behind me that are going to be able to say, based on the weight of that person's vote, then they carry more weight because they represent more people. And that would be able to keep that in a way. And there's folks right behind me right here that have got some suggestions on that. And ladies and gentlemen, that's why I think this would be very important to do this. I think there's some real desire on the parts of a lot of counties in the state of Wyoming, because we've got some small counties. And quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, and Representative Yin, we're seeing the rural vote, in my mind, begin to diminish in its ability to be able to really represent the folks in the amount of land that it does represent. Our population centers are becoming quickly able to, in a democracy, to be able to outvote. We see large swaths of rural areas taking a small piece of a municipality that basically they can't really have that kind of representation because they simply don't have the votes to be able to override that. I think we did a very good job of trying to redistrict. I think we were very thoughtful. We tried to be respectful of that. But just in seeing how our population has changed and the dynamics, we're seeing less and less rural voice, I believe, based on a lot of our determinations on how we redistrict, and more power or abilities coming into those positions of the municipalities as they grow. And I think this is a recognition that we can't forget that we have rural people that need to have representation. And if they're tied into municipalities, their voice diminishes. So this would be an effort. And I don't know, not everybody maybe wants to hear it this way, but in my mind, it's very similar to what we live with nationally. Wyoming has less than 600,000 people, and yet we share the same number of senators that California or New York do. And the reason that is because the design of our nation was that the Senate was what Jefferson called the cooling tray, that the mass and the representatives were large, that's where the appropriations took place, but then everybody had to be an equal level and footing on the table when they came to those appropriations. And that's where that deliberation took place. So that was equal representation with far less than the population would allow. And so, but we are based on our representation in our House. So, and if we can look at some different options here through this bill and through this committee work, then we can address some of those things. And I believe that we, as a state, want to do everything that we possibly can to make sure that our rural lifestyle, and I hear it a lot on the floor, we want to protect what Wyoming is. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is a vehicle that we're going to have to truly address if we're going to be able to do that. I've said in committee meetings where I've got hunters that come from a place like, Minnesota, and they'll say, Chip, he said, the only thing that we get is whatever Minneapolis, St. Paul tells us we're going to get. He said, we simply can't mass enough votes to do anything about it, and we have to do whatever they want us to do. He said, how awesome would it be if we could have a senator that could go down, and then it would matter because they need our senator to be able to get their agenda done. Suddenly we mattered. And so I don't know if this is going to fix that, but I do think this is a very valuable thing that we need to try and really look long and hard at the potential of getting back into alignment with our state constitution in a way that doesn't disenfranchise anyone, but it gives them their voice, and that we don't see these rural areas just quietly go away and submit themselves to only municipalities in the larger voting centers. And so,
Follow up? And Minority Leader Ian is right. I think only 3 of us on this committee were actually in the body, and only 1 on the committee at the time of redistricting, and that happens every 10 years, correct? So thank goodness we missed that one. That was a heavy lift.
Mr. Chairman, so we actually could do it anytime we wanted. We are only required to do it, so we have to do it every 10 years after the census.
All right, thank you. I had one question. On page 5, we say the Management Council shall assign a committee. Would that be an existing standing committee, or would it be a special committee?
Mr. Chairman, I would have to say assign a committee, so it would be assigned to probably a standing committee. And so I don't think I want to try to create another committee on this and create more expense. I would like to be able to see this assigned to a committee that would be able to really thoughtfully look into this. And it could even be a select committee that would have this designation and be able to go through this information and dig this out. So,
Thank you.
and ladies and gentlemen, if that's something that you guys wanted to change in this, I am completely open to that. If you would want to look to another way of not over-laboring our standing committees or something, that would certainly be something that you guys could amend, that would be a thoughtful amendment, and I think much appreciated, so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All right, any other questions? All right, Representative Williams, welcome. Please identify yourself and give comments you'd like to have, and then we'll have some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. J.D. Williams, House District 2, members of the committee. This is a conversation that we have often in rural Wyoming, especially in the last 30 years, since many rural counties have lost their senator, their representatives. I believe this is a conversation that more of rural Wyoming would like to participate in, and even rural America would like to participate in. If you consider a county such as Weston, that is split right down the middle by a district line, it is true that they have 2 representatives in the House of Representatives, but and this could happen, in the event that myself and Speaker Nyman voted against each other on the floor of the House, you can imagine Weston County's feeling of being disenfranchised, of having a net vote of 0 on any particular issue. And so this conversation that House Bill 269, 296 takes to the interim is one that means a lot to Weston County, but means a lot to House District 2 and all of rural Wyoming. And I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Representative Williams? All right, seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you, committee. Appreciate your time.
Mr. Secretary, does the Secretary of State's office have anything to weigh in on this?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will go quick. Definitely want to hear from all the folks from Weston County and across Wyoming that have come to this committee hearing, and we heard this in the Senate this morning. I stand in full support of House Bill 296. As some of you probably remember, my last no vote, I think Chairman Knapp was there, my last no vote in the legislature was against the redistricting bill in 2022, and one of the many reasons I voted against it was because that this issue wasn't handled. And I think it's very fitting that we go ahead and examine this and get it handled. I think that one thing I said this morning is that maybe some language in here on creating a test case. I mean, the 14th Amendment has long been debated, and as you know, it was the predicate for Roe v. Wade, which was overturned in 2022, of course, in a great decision. And so for a long time, I think the 14th Amendment was interpreted wrong by a lot of Supreme Courts in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I think possibly looking at a test case, I mean, it seems like there's kind of, in terms of the options here, there was a lot of discussion about the proportional voting so that it doesn't increase the size of the legislature, but you have a weighted vote within each member of the legislature according to the number of people they represent. But the other way to address this would be to have a test case. And the bill does not go in that direction, but I think some language to examine that would be appropriate. I also think in terms, I talked a little bit about with citizens from Weston County, we started talking about how this might look in Section 3, and you asked a very good question, Chairman Knapp, in terms of, and I think the bill's pretty clear that it's assigned to a committee, that a committee's not created. And so I certainly am a huge advocate of the Joint Corporations Committee, and I think that's a place it could go. The thing I think the committee needs to think about is that, I think you would need more meetings. I think 3 meetings in the 25 interim would not be enough. And we want to give this its fair due, but we've also got the insurance stuff and the utility stuff, and then of course, elections and business stuff. So I think I would recommend up to 5 to 6. I mean, I think it would almost double it. So that's a question for you, I think, to grapple with. And maybe it comes out on the back end, but I just want to make sure that we implement this bill fully and that it gets its fair due so that, and I think it is something that I would lean towards thinking about as it moves forward rather than on the back end with Management Council, how it looks in terms of the 25 interim. But I'm very supportive of House Bill 296, and we really need to address this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Are there any questions? None? Okay. We will we'll move on for the public, and thank you for attending and driving down here and being part of this. And we certainly want to hear from you. And so why don't we, there's 4 chairs up here. So if anybody was here to testify on this, you can just come up and fill a chair, and then we'll kind of go from left to right. So one thing I will say is we do have one more bill from the speaker, and I guess as long as we hold him hostage here, we can't start on the floor. But if you can make your comments concise, we do want to hear from you. So if you can make your comments concise and maybe not repeat what you might hear from another witness, but certainly we want to hear from you. So if we can start over here, and if you want to state your name. Oh, well, I was going my left, sorry. All right, we'll start on this end. We'll mix it up a little bit today. All right, if you could just please state your name and your testimony, please.
Chairman Knapp and committee, thank you for considering this bill. My name is Tricia Bauman, and I'm from Weston County, and I am a party to the construction of this bill. I am also a member of the Concerned Citizens of Weston County, which is a informal but very active group that without officers. It's a very informal group. Chairman Knapp, since 1992, Wyoming has chosen to redistrict every 10 years after a federal census. There has always been great dispute in this process. Sometimes lawsuits ensued. Even though for 30 years there has been improvement in the districting process, there is always a disproportionately large percentage of citizens who walk away disheartened after the process by the legislature's failure to follow its own constitution. My personal hill to die on, so to speak, Chairman, is that Wyoming needs to either follow Article 3, Section 3, or it needs to properly amend this portion of our Constitution and then follow the Constitution as amended. Other people have different hills to die on with this issue when it comes to apportionment. After 30 years of building pressure, the citizenry, Chairman, needs a venue, i.e. the interim committee, to act as a relief valve on this issue. We desire time for thoughtfulness and consideration of the law of ideas, and my prayer is for an amicable solution. In anticipation of the interim committee, I have been party to already creating 2 proposals for apportionment. They actually don't even agree with each other, but I have them, and I'm working on a 3rd because I personally am not going to die on a hill for a certain thing to happen, except that we come to a solution, amicable. And so I will be prepared with at least 3 proposals for that committee. Many citizens are hoping to be involved in the final solution. I'm going to make a brief introduction of Weston County and its citizens' desire to follow Article 3, Section 3. In 1992, the Weston County Board of Commissioners passed a resolution that it was not in favor of the districts that were about to be formed. Then in 2014, the Weston County Board of Commissioners passed a resolution that they are in favor of following Article 3, Section 3. Then again in 2022, the Weston County Board of Commissioners passed another resolution that they were in favor of Article 3, Section 3 and following it. Can you see the pressure building a little bit? Then that same year, the Republican Party in Weston County passed a resolution that they support Article 3, Section 3 and following it. And that went to the state Republican Party, who also passed a resolution that they're in support of Article 3, Section 3. Then, to the dismay of many people across the state, Weston County had a little bit of a relief valve from this pressure. And in 2024, Weston County declared vacancies and filled positions for what it considers constitutional district senator and constitutional district representative. These individuals represent Weston County citizens in the pursuit of districts that are in conformance with Article 3, Section 3 of our Constitution. These individuals do not seek to be seated in the current legislature, thereby giving Weston County, thereby giving Weston County additional representation for the voters of our district. But these 2 people do desire to be seated when all of legislative districts in the state are in compliance with the Constitution. Sitting behind me is the Weston County, oops, you're over here. Sitting to my right is the Weston County's constitutional senator, Sue Morales. And we have many Weston County concerned citizens with us here today. I believe the 4 of us are the only ones that wish to speak, so you don't get scared. But could you wave how many of you there are? Thank you. And then right here beside me is the Carl Lacey, who is our constitutional district representative. What I would like to do is thank our current and seated legislators that represent portions of Weston County. They've been very gracious through this process. And I know that there's people accusing Weston County of trying to replace these people, and we're not. If you'll notice on the bill, it is sponsored by Chip Nyman and J.D. Williams and Driscoll and Steinmetz in the Senate. And those are our representatives and senators. So that's very gracious. And I'd also like to thank Representatives Smith and Strzok and Senator Hicks for sponsoring this bill. And I stand for questions.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions from the committee? Nothing? Well, got off easy there.
Thank you.
All right, next, please.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Carl Lacey. I am the constitutional representative for Weston County. I just would like to lay a little groundwork on some previous things that we've gone through. A number of years ago, we had a county commissioner who was duly elected and who served out part of his term and then decided to move out of the county. At that time, a group of concerned citizens got together and to discuss whether he should resign or stay. And we got together and made a petition, and it went to the county, the people of the county, to inform them what we thought. Part of the county thought that he should stay, part of the county thought that he should resign. But when it was explained, our point of view, most of the people wanted a resignation, which didn't happen. We were able to garner 274 votes or signatures in less than a week to present our resolution. So I'm going to forward a little bit now to, I don't want to cover any other ground like you said, but when I've discussed with this with the people of the county, they're wanting to know what's going on up there in the courthouse. And when it's explained to them, Article 3, Section 3, what it is about, they want to know, how come we're not doing that? Why are our representatives not upholding their oath of their Constitution and following the Constitution? And my point is, I guess, redistricting is part of it, the confusion. So one of our county commissioners, Garrett Borton, left some informative words that I like, and he says, if not today, when is a good day to follow the Constitution? With that, I'll answer any questions that you have.
All right, next up, please.
Dan Newbow, Weston County Concerned Citizens. I think this is a twofold bill. There's a lot of talk going on down here this year about election integrities, and this bill addresses it quite well too. In addressing integrity, the first thing you have to have is an integrative issue to make integrative. And we do not have an integrative election from get-go because it's not constitutional. And in that sense, you can't advance it until you get the core problem fixed. I lost my train of thought for a second, Mr. Chairman, excuse me.
right.
There's an election that you may have heard about that was Weston County had a little problem. That's misinformation. Weston County didn't have a problem. Crook County, Weston County, Niobrara County, and the only reason Goshen County wasn't in there because there wasn't a senator involved in the race. And this following the state policies on elections, you might also remember another election, wasn't an election, it was an appointment. When Representative Hans Hunt gave up his seat, there was a vacancy, which affects our current representative, JD, who was involved in that. And under the policies that this state runs elections, and they got to be policies because they're not laws, because they're not constitutional. The counties followed the policy as dictated. They held a meeting in Ibarra County, and we sent our county commissioners down. The fly in the ointment is Weston County sent 5 county commissioners to that to pick who could represent that House district. 4 out of the 5 people that went there did not live in that district. Now, that is not American, that's not legal, it's not Constitution. That is an abomination to the very fabric of this state and the United States. And I forgot to say when we got started that we believe that it's by the grace of God and 10 years of labor of this committee that we got here today. And why some were thanked, there's a couple more that did not get thanked. One was you guys for hearing the bill. Legislative Service did us a tremendous job. I've heard them, some senators that I've talked to, well, the bill came back the way we didn't want. They did not understand a bill sent down here by the people. And within days, they called us and said, we don't understand what you're trying to say. And we told them the essence. They fired up a bill, sent it to us. First draft, 1-word correction, and it was presented to you. Now that is a service. Secondly, I would like to thank the great secretary of this state who has helped us get here. And last but not least, the greatest statesman I have ever known, my representative, Speaker of the House, Chip Nineman. So get back to where I should be, is we are now going to go statewide, because as it was mentioned here today, we did take this to this meetings. All 23 counties were represented. And this is a representative type government. So we can now say that the whole state is in favor of it. And so we know the state, that we the people want better, we the people deserve better, and we think working together, we the people can do better. And as far as to you, Mr. Chairman, when you asked if Chip was going to get speaker to this, why this committee has only been working 10 years, I have been working on this since 1992, and I have a lot of history if anybody's interested or any questions, and so therefore I will stand for questions.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, Ms. Morales, or I should call you Constitutional Senator Morales. You're up next, and I do apologize. We are pressed for time, so I know that a lot of you came down maybe to speak. You have very good representation up here, and if you have anything else that you wanted to say that hasn't been said, fine. But otherwise, we'll move on with testimony. So please.
Okay, I'll make this brief. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Sue Morales, and I'm the Weston County Constitutional District Senator, and I'm in complete agreement with this bill. On the opening day of the 68th legislature, I was privileged to sit on the Senate floor at the gracious invitation of Ogden Driscoll. I, along with Tricia, witnessed the new senators take their oath of office, swearing to uphold the Wyoming Constitution as well as the Constitution of the United States of America. And I'm sure the representatives took the same oath. This bill is a vehicle for us to do just that. As it stands now, Wyoming is not in compliance with its own constitution, specifically Article 3, Section 3. This bill would set into motion the steps necessary to come to a solution. And there are several solutions. We don't want to argue about what solution it is. That's something for the committee to do. But I know that it is possible. We've come up with a couple different solutions. So that is what this bill is designed to do. If people want to take it further and want to debate the 14th Amendment, then this bill could be amended. But as it is now, we simply want to be in compliance with the Wyoming State Constitution and the 14th Amendment. So, and I stand for questions.
All right, any questions? Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you. Anybody else from in the room from the public that would like to speak? Going to give you an opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and committee. I'll make this pretty quick. I'm Stanley Jasinski. I'm speaking as secretary for the Weston County Republican Party. This bill before you today started out as a resolution in March at our caucuses. At our caucuses, precinct committee men and women from around Weston County adopted this resolution. Following that, it was brought forth at our convention, and it was adopted again from precinct committee men and women from around Weston County representing their constituents. This is the voice and the will of the people of Weston County. And then subsequently, Weston County brought this resolution down to the state convention where it was adopted there. And that's how it became a bill. And what I want to say is the people that have spoken and prior to me have been working on this diligently. And they've also seen in this process, they've seen where there could be tweaks. The resolution, which is now a bill, could be changed and adapted by learning through this experience. And I think the state will learn from this experience. If you adopt this bill today and go forward with it, a lot more education and understanding will come out of it. And I do believe as a representative of the Weston County Republican Party, there's other Republican parties, county parties looking at this. And because I come from Massachusetts, and I moved here over 8 years ago because I was no longer being represented by my state, because my state is controlled by Boston, Worcester, and Springfield, Massachusetts. And it's taxation without representation. It's laws being appointed and voted on without representation, because it's only those cities. And this is where Wyoming's heading to. So I just hope, I support this bill, and I hope you will too. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions? All right, we do have one person, and we will get to organizations, I promise you. We do have one person online for this, correct?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we do.
Let's go ahead and let Alan in.
Okay.
Hello, Representative Knapp, Chairman Knapp.
Hello, this is former Representative Slagle. Please identify yourself, and we'll take your comments very quickly.
I am Alan Slagle from Weston County. I definitely support this bill. I think one thing that hasn't really been brought up today that I'll bring up quickly is our founding fathers started our country as a representative republic, not a democracy. I mean, we hear a lot of talk about democracy now in our society, but we're not a democracy. And that's kind of where this one man, one vote comes from. And if you go to the Constitution of the United States, Article 4, Section 4 talks about each state is guaranteed a representative form of government. And I think we need to keep focused on this when we think about how Wyoming set up their constitution in Article 3, Section 3 of our state constitution. And so I would just I would ask you to forward this bill on. I think it's important for the committees to look at it over the interim, and maybe we can bring forth a bill that will correct this inadequacy in our state. And I will stand for any questions.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Slagle. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much for testifying. We appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you.
All right, so we believe that the public is the most important. You traveled a long ways to come here, and so we went with everybody first. We will have organizations, if the clerk's office has any comment, no. But organizations, please come up, and we're going to limit this to thumbs up, thumbs down? No, we'll limit it to about 1 minute each, please.
Mr. Chairman, Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau, to be uncharacteristically brief, good bill, support it, ask you to take it forward. I would take any questions you or the committee may have.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Marguerite Herman here for the League of Women Voters. Our basic tenet of our organization is one person, one vote. And we have fought for 105 years for equal representation, equal voice in government for all people. And that we were formed at the point of the 19th Amendment, women's suffrage. I'll be as brief as I can, condensing here on the fly. I will just say, I don't see, it's hard to see how studying this will resolve some basic conflicts between the two things. Every county gets 2 reps and a senator, and the 14th Amendment. And you can study it, but basic principles still apply. The principle of that, we've had several court decisions that reinforcing the idea of one person, one vote, equal representation, equal voice from the person in the most crowded neighborhood in Cheyenne to the person who lives in the wonderful big open spaces of Niobrara County. They have equal value to the state, equal value, should have an equal voice in the legislature. So you've got the court cases. You've got the principle that a legislature represents people, not acres. That the practicality, that if you do the math, it comes out to about 450 reps and about 230 senators. And that just physically, I don't know, we don't really have a place to accommodate that at this point. We could, I suppose. And the duty, I would just say also the duty of everyone elected to the legislature to represent everyone in his or her district. The diversity in the state is wonderful, even within the same block, within the same county. You've got great diversity of people, and anyone who's elected to represent people in the state in a district has to be committed to represent every voice, not just one or two. And I think we need to hold our people to it. And we heard during the redistricting, and especially the representative from Goshen County did an excellent job. She was courageous in fighting for one rep for Goshen County. And it didn't meet constitutional muster, the 14th
All right,
Amendment. So,
thank you. I'm going to have to
thank
cut you off. I love to listen to you every time you
I
come.
understand. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
But thank you. Any questions? All right, I will close public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Representative Brown, seconded by Minority Leader Yin. Are there any amendments? No? Oh, yes, Minority.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just briefly, thank you guys for coming out here. Really appreciate it. I think you guys got the short shaft during redistricting. I really do. And it's our job to listen to you guys. So if this is something that you told your representatives, we need to listen to this, let's listen to it. So thank you. Thank you to the representative that brought the bill. I'm in favor.
All right, any other comments? Okay, we are voting on House Bill 296. Would you please do roll call?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a roll call vote on House Bill number 296, constitutional apportionment. Representative Brown.
Aye.
Representative Locke.
Aye.
Representative Heft. Aye. Representative Johnson.
Aye.
Representative Lucas.
Aye.
Representative Webb.
Aye.
Representative Weber.
Aye.
Representative Yin.
Aye.
Chairman Knapp.
Aye.
Chairman, we have 9 ayes.
All right, with that, House Bill 296, constitutional apportionment, does pass the committee. And we appreciate you coming and talking with us today, very much so. Thank you. With that, this committee is adjourned.